And welcome everybody to another victorious edition of the Assembly Call. This is Andy Bottoms. I'm sitting in for Jared tonight in the host chair, at least. We'll be talking about IU's 74-47 victory over the Illini in a game that IU got off to a really slow start. Actually, trailed by one at the half and outscored Illinois 47-19 after the break, scoring as many points in the second half as Illinois did the entire game, and really putting on a clinic on both ends of the floor during the second half. So we'll go through and talk through what this game means, and also take a look at what it now means with only a couple games left in the Big Ten season for IU, at least. Some other teams with 3 games. So we'll talk through what it all means and where we sit right now. But I will start. I'm gonna attempt to do both a bottoms line and a banner moment tonight. I think if for no other reason than there were so many good things to talk about. So if Jared were here, I would assume that his banner moment would be something about the freshman class again. If the banner moment is a thought of why IU will be able to hang another banner, I certainly think the contributions of this freshman class were really big tonight. Thomas Bryant again for the second straight game scored the first 7 points of the second half. OG Anunoby and Juwan Morgan both played really big games, and as I remarked on Twitter, I think on more than one occasion, the defensive intensity when those two were out there was completely different than at other times, and really during that big run in the second half, those guys were critical to that, and the fact that Malcolm Hill did not have a basket until the 7.5-minute mark of the game. Certainly a lot of guys played defense on him. Colin Hartman was one. OG did a really good job on him in the second half. So, Bryant played a really good second half, got a bit frustrated in the first and turned things around. And I think when you look at this freshman class and guys stepping up, particularly with Robert Johnson down, was a really big deal for this team tonight. So, again, I think that's what Jared's banner moment would be. We may never know if I'm right or not, but that's what I'll say tonight. And the freshmen and the bench in general have continued to step up and play well for this team. So I'll transition and throw it to myself for the bottom line from tonight's game. And to me, it was a great second half from Yogi. I'll try to find this tweet here. Jeff Rabjohns tweeted out that Yogi had, I think, 19 points in 19 minutes in the second half. Really was in control of the game. And just played a terrific game with IU shorthanded in the backcourt, with Robert Johnson not playing. I thought Yogi really settled everybody down, got in Thomas Bryant's face a little bit at the end when he was probably lucky to not get a technical, and just provided really good leadership. So here was the second half numbers: 19 points in 19 minutes, 5 of 6 from three-point range, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and no turnovers. And I thought Yogi did a really good job defensively as well. I mean, for IU to give up 47 points in the game, but also 19 in the second half. It really felt like a bit similar to Illinois' last game against Wisconsin, when they played tough for a while, but when things really started to, the other team started to punch back, they really started to fold, and it just felt like in the second half, if IU could get them to that point, the Illini would fall into kind of here we go again mode, and have guys really taking one-on-one shots. And I thought Yogi, propelled IU into that spot. Really played well to start the second half on a huge run for IU coming out of halftime, and really continued it through the second half. So in a game when normally we probably would have liked to see Yogi play less minutes, I think we all knew coming in without Robert Johnson he would play a lot tonight, and he certainly delivered. So with that, I'll bring in my co-host for tonight, Ryan Phillips and Will DeWitt. Ryan, we'll go to you first. I don't know what your rant would be about. Maybe some of the backseat coaching. Maybe you could get a rant in on if you'd like. But I'll be interested to see what topic you hit in a game that IU won handily and played really well in the second half.
And whoever came up with the idea for backseat coaching needs to be fired, like right now. I thought that was the dumbest thing ever. But anyway, let's get away from that, because I could probably do an entire show just yelling about that. I think that people need to step back, realize what's going on here, and I've been saying this for the past couple of weeks, but with 2 games to go in the Big Ten season, Indiana has a game-and-a-half lead in first place over Maryland and Iowa. The team's final 2 games are at Iowa, at home against Maryland, and tonight they went on the road to Illinois. Is a tough place to play for Indiana, traditionally always has been. I mean, you need to look no further than Cody Zeller missing that back cut under the basket to end a game. And remember, that was the best Indiana team we've seen in a long time, and they got beat there. And they took care of business. A slow start, got punched in the mouth, and as we've seen from this team so many times, it was bad, and then they just straightened it out, moved right ahead, and sort of methodically took over the game in the second half and turned it into a blowout. And it was methodical on both ends of the floor. And you're looking at a team that, unlike, we've talked about this a lot, the Tom Crean teams down the stretch typically fold. They don't necessarily, completely collapse. We haven't seen that every year, but they tend to fade a bit and not play as well. This is a team that's actually playing better as the year is going on and building to something. And, I'm very confident going into Iowa and Maryland that if Indiana wins one of those games, they will have at worst a share of the Big Ten title. And that is unbelievable considering where this team came from, where this team was in December in complete disarray, and then losing your second leading scorer, and somehow turned it all around and is in a position to win the Big Ten outright with 2 games left in the season, to have a 1.5 game lead, and however many days off it is now, it's like a week off until they play Iowa, a chance to recover, get Robert Johnson back. So I think that it's awesome to be where this team is right now. Avoided the road slip up against Illinois tonight, played a great game, and now can move on and play those 2 championship games basically the next week.
Yep, I agree. As I talked about with Jared and Alex on Podcast on the Brink this week, this was really a game that certainly isn't going to help you a lot from a bracket perspective, but it was certainly the last one in the regular season, at least, that was a chance to stub their toe. And while I think we worried for half that might be the case, it certainly wasn't after they came out of the locker room. So, Will, I'll throw it to you for the stat of the game. I'm sure there were plenty to pick from on a night like tonight, particularly in the second half.
Yeah, I did the halftime report, and I couldn't find too many good stats to talk about then. I was getting kind of nervous, like, how am I going to be able to pull out a stat of the game? But thankfully, like you said, plenty of stats to choose from here. So I'm going to talk about rebounding for the stat of the game tonight. IU had the total edge 37-17, which led to an advantage 15-2 with second chance points. And really, I mean, the Hoosiers were just cleaning the boards tonight. I mean, they finished with a 40% offensive rebounding percentage, which was exactly what we had when we played them, in Assembly Hall, just a short few weeks ago, which I thought that was kind of, pretty darn super. I know Ryan likes that phrase, that we finished with the same exact offensive rebounding percentage of 2 games against them. And then we finished with a 93.1 defensive rebounding percentage, which was insane. We only allowed, Illinois just a handful of offensive rebounds. If I'm not mistaken, I think, 2? So that's not even a handful. That's just a couple. And, I mean, just taking a look at some of the numbers here, I mean, Yogi had 5 rebounds. Thomas had 8. He was only 2 shy from that double-double. And even Troy had 5, and he missed a lot of time with that injury there in the second half. So, really, I thought the rebounding was one of the bright spots in tonight's game.
Yeah, agreed. They really dominated, and it was an area coming in where it felt like IU had an advantage, and was one thing they would be able to really take advantage of with Johnson out. That it probably forced them at times to maybe play bigger lineups, which was a good matchup for IU against Illinois. So as we start to think about going down the stretch here, there's only a couple games left. We start to think about Big Ten tournament time. We start to think about these last couple home games and the NCAA tournament moving ahead. A great place to go and look for tickets for those things is on SeatGeek. They've recently taken on a sponsorship of the show, and we're all really excited about it because we've used the service in the past, find it extremely easy to use. As Jared mentioned last time, the way that you can go on and they grade out the deal quality for you when you go on, that becomes really important when you go to venues that you're not real sure of where good seats are and what a good price is. So when you start to think about Big Ten tournament time, NCAA tournament time, those kinds of things are really helpful, and I know IU fans are going to want to get out and support this team who, as Ryan said, has put themselves in a great position. So that's one thing that I find great about SeatGeek. The other is that it hides, there's no hidden fees like you see on a StubHub or something like that, where you think you have a price for one thing and you go to actually pay and it's something completely different. All the fees are right up front. You see what you're going to pay. When you click to select those seats exactly what it's going to be. And so when you go to do that, Assembly Call listeners are going to be able to get $20 off of their first SeatGeek purchase. So all you have to do to go and do that is download the free SeatGeek app, go to the Settings tab, and click Add a Promo Code, and add the code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY. And when you do that, SeatGeek's going to send you $20 after you make your first ticket purchase. So get a little money back, something really easy to use. Again, the app is free and something that we really encourage everybody to try out, something that we've used and feel really strongly about. And so would encourage you to do the same as you start looking for tickets, potentially to Yogi's senior night, as he's only got 40 minutes left in Assembly Hall, which I know is hard for us to believe, and I'm sure even harder on Doc Libby to think about as well. So again, that promo code is Assembly. The free SeatGeek app is where you want to go to use that, and you can get $20 back on your first purchase. So you are listening to the Assembly Call. This is Andy Bottoms, and I'm here tonight with Will DeWitt and Ryan Phillips, and we're talking about IU's big 74-47 victory over Illinois in Champaign tonight. And so, I touched on a second ago Yogi, and knowing that his senior night's coming up. Certainly an important night for him as somebody who's, I think it was his 131st start tonight in an IU uniform. And we talked a few games ago about him really needing to step up down the stretch. And certainly he did that in the second half tonight. Wanted to talk a little bit about him. It feels like we often wait till the end to talk about Yogi, but I think his performance in the second half in particular tonight warrants him getting top billing. So Ryan, what did you see from him as a whole in the game tonight, but particularly what he did in the second half to really get loose and score 19 points?
That might have been Yogi Ferrell's best half of basketball this year. I thought that he really was locked in. He was just on fire. I was ready for him to do the Jordan shoulder shrug at one point with the threes he was hitting. I mean, he was just nailing everything and just looked so confident. 5 of 6 from 3 in the second half, 7 of 9 from the field. And as you said, 19 points, only 1 turnover for handling the ball that much, but 27 points for the game, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, a steal, 3 turnovers, and 11 of 18 from the field. I mean, it was just a fantastic game from him, and he really stepped up given that Robert Johnson is out, and provided a scoring punch. I said going in, I thought he needed to have a big game for us because it's a tough environment on the road. You need your seniors to step up, and you need those guys. You mentioned the freshmen in your pseudo-banner moment, and I think that it was good that we got those guys involved and got some points out of them, but also we needed our senior leaders to step up, and guys who've been there before and dealt with hostile environments, and Yogi and Nick Zeisloff both really stepped up, hit some big shots, got the offense going. And you saw in that second half, Yogi had a group that he felt comfortable with out there, and he was playing well with them, and Tom Crean left him on the floor for an extended period of time. You didn't see a lot of subbing or rotation. We've seen that recently, that when things are going well, he's just going to leave guys out there who are playing well, and Yogi led the charge on offense and defense, and so and that was something that got mentioned during the game, is how good he is developed and how well he is playing as an on-ball defender. So I thought that it was overall just a fantastic game from Yogi. It's great that it was one of his last road games. He showed up and had one of his better halves of basketball in an IU uniform.
So you touched on Nick Zeisloff a bit, and one of the other big storyline really coming into this game was the availability of Robert Johnson. And I don't know that anybody felt really optimistic even heading into today that he was going to go based on at least anything that had been floated out there. And so he didn't suit up tonight, sat out the game. There's really no timetable for his return. So we'll see whether he ends up being available for next Tuesday night at Iowa. But for tonight, he sat out, and so Nick Zeisloff was a guy that got inserted into the starting lineup for him. And I thought he really struggled in the first half. He had a couple really poor entry passes. He missed shots, and didn't play all that well. Almost felt like putting too much pressure on himself, stepping into that. Really wanted to do well in that role. But in the second half, I thought he played worlds better on both ends of the floor. He's never going to be a great defender, but I thought he played good position defense and moved his feet, and knocked down some threes. Didn't even, I don't think, try to make any other entry passes. I don't know if he had kind of scared himself off of that a little bit after the first half, but I thought he really bounced back and played well. And then Harrison Nego also got some minutes, and I thought he did a lot better after that first stretch when he and Zeisloft weren't on the floor at the same time, which happened after one of the first substitutions. So I'll be interested to see if the lineups shake that out. But those guys both stepped up and played well. So Will, I'll go to you first on this, just to get your thoughts on Nick Zeisloft in particular, and if you've got any comments on Harrison, feel free to throw those in as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Again, on the halftime report, I talked about Nick a little bit. I didn't have a lot of kind words. I didn't have any negative words. I just didn't have a lot of kind words for him. He was 1 for 3 in that first half, and he had the 3 turnovers, and I was just kind of appalled. I was like, we missed Rojo. This isn't going to be good. I was really nervous to see how he's going to do in that second half. But like you said, it was kind of like a tale of two halves for him. He had 11 points. He was 3 from 4, much improved at 75% from beyond the arc, and he didn't have 1 turnover in that entire second half. So like you said, I thought he did much better, just not just taking care of the ball, but scoring those points when we needed them the most. And then Harrison as well. I mean, he puts in quality minutes each time that he goes out there. He does a lot of the little things that people take for granted. He doesn't wow you on that stat sheet, but he just he's a bigger contributor than most people would realize.
Yeah, I think that both guys played well. I think that Nick Zeisloft especially. I mean, look, when he's hitting threes, it makes up for a lot of mistakes that he could make on either end of the floor. And when he gets into that phase, he is just on fire and automatic. It really can hurt an opposing team because he can move back so far and shoot from such a long distance and make them that it's really just demoralizing when a defense is playing good defense and has to face that. But Nick played 17 minutes in the second half. I don't think we've ever seen him play 17 minutes and a half, and he really played well. 11 points in that second half, 3 of 4 from 3, made 2 free throws on the game. Leading scorer, tied with Thomas Bryant with 14 points. He only had 2 rebounds, 1 assist, but as you guys said, he settled in, and he was our second leading minutes guy in minutes with 32 minutes total. So I think that he played a very good game, and it was a nice bounce back for him because he's kind of been up and down shooting the ball all season, and I think that tonight he really looked comfortable. He missed a couple of wide open looks in the first half, but I think that was just adrenaline early. So I thought it was a really nice game from Nick. Nego is just one of those guys that just keeps showing up better and better every week. And I thought tonight he played very well, especially defensively. He was in the right spot. He was causing some havoc. And at some point he's got to get the confidence to shoot, though. And I assume that will be a sophomore year thing for him to concentrate on because when he's out there, teams do not close out to him at all, and so it leaves him wide open, and it can really hurt the offense when he's not able to knock down a jumper.
Well, another guy with a big second half, as so many seem to tonight, was Thomas Bryant. And again, I thought ended up picking up a kind of a silly second foul in the first half. Part of that was trying to chase down a bad entry pass, but just didn't. I think he had 4 or 5 points in the first half, but just didn't really seem into the game. I think Zach Osterman tweeted something out about potentially some health concerns with him, that he really seemed to be getting fatigued. But in the second half, he came out and again, as I mentioned earlier, scored the first 7 points of the half, hit a 3 again. Overall in the second half, 10 points, 3 of 3 from the field, hit his only 3-pointer, hit all 3 free throws, had 5 rebounds and an assist, and 1 turnover and a steal. He really came out in the second half, and I thought IU did a better job of being adamant about feeding him the ball in the post, and it really set the tone in the second half because IU took more 3-point shots in the first half than it did 2-point shots, and in a game when you have a size advantage inside, I think that left a lot of people frustrated. Now IU did torch Illinois from behind the arc in the second half, so you can make the argument maybe they were doing the right thing after all. But I thought IU really set the tone early by getting the ball to Bryant, and he responded by playing really well. Ryan, what did you see out of Thomas tonight? Is this just another part of his maturing process, being able to step up in a game that he didn't play as well in the first half? What do you kind of make of his second half performance in particular?
Yeah, I thought Max Bielfeldt really filled in well in the first half, getting that post position and being the screener when Bryant wasn't getting the job done a little bit. I thought that Bryant played pretty good defense. He had 1 or 2 drives where he didn't step up and make the right play defensively. But I thought offensively he was constantly getting position. It was a matter of getting him the ball Maybe just some reversals were slow in the first half, and by the time the ball got around to throw the entry pass, he wasn't open as he was originally when he got in his position. But I thought in the second half, like you said, I thought he was real focused. Came out, he stepped out and hit that three, which was absolutely huge because we want teams to start guarding that. It opens up the middle of the floor. We saw that against Purdue. We thought that we talked about how that was a brilliant game planning move. That it really opened up the floor when Bryant would step out and have the threat to hit that three, and we know he can make it. He was just efficient and effective all night. He had 5 rebounds in the second half alone, but in the first, in the game overall, he had 8, played 26 minutes in the second half. He was part of that group that really made a run on Illinois, and Crean kept him out there, and he played 16 minutes in the second half, and I think that might be his most for a half, this season. Really didn't see him sub in. I mean, that group of at the time it was Yogi, Nick Zeisloff, Thomas Bryant, Juwan Morgan, and Colin Hartman. They just were playing so well that Tom Crean didn't need to sub them out. I mean, it's a bummer that you didn't see a guy like OG Anunoby get more run in this game, but he didn't need to. I mean, this was a really good run by those 5 guys, and Bryant and Yogi were right at the fore of it. They were the 2 guys really making things happen on both ends of the floor, and I thought that it was nice of Bryant to see him struggle initially for the second straight game and come out on fire in the second half and really make a focused effort to get the position. It was sort of that early on. It was great. It was sort of like he just basically told Illinois, and Crean almost telegraphed it too. It's like, we're going to put him right there. We're going to give him the ball, and he's going to go score, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that was pretty much the way it was because Illinois does not have a great post defense, post defender to stop him. So I thought it was great for Bryant. Great for that group that really stayed together, some guys who had been struggling and played very well.
All right, so I guess the next place to hit is the bench. It's funny because when you look at the stats tonight, only 7 points off the bench, and I think that's been, such a recurring theme for this team over these last few weeks. Just it always seems like a different guy stepping up, a number of different guys making contributions. But that bench was a little bit shorter tonight, with Zeisloff being pushed into the starting lineup with Robert Johnson being out. But you look down at the bench. So you got 7 points. Bielfeldt with 4, Morgan with 3. Kind of tallying up the rebounds. Looks like 10 rebounds, 4 assists, and just 1 turnover, pair of blocks, and 2 steals. So there was still some of that production. It wasn't necessarily from a scoring standpoint, but definitely still felt like guys stepped in and contributed. Will, anybody for you that stood out from a bench perspective?
Yeah, from a bench perspective, especially defensively, I'd say OG. I thought he did really good on the defensive end of the floor tonight. I thought he brought a lot of energy in his minutes that he was out there. I mean, he played, if I'm checking here, he only played 17 minutes, and he didn't have, any points. But I thought he did a really good job. He got a block. I thought he did just a great job on defense. And Malcolm Hill, like he said, he didn't score until like 7.5 minutes left to go in the game. So I thought he did a pretty good job on containing him when they were both in that game together.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It was funny. I didn't realize that he didn't score. I think he had a couple chances by the rim that one of which he got blocked on a break scenario. He only took 2 shots, but I thought the same thing. I mean, it's funny sometimes the guy can play so well and not really. It doesn't necessarily show up in the box score, but I would guess when I do the lineups tonight and look at his plus minus, it's going to be pretty darn good because he really did set the tone defensively along with Juwan Morgan, who. He was the other one that stood out for me. I know I mentioned earlier. I mean, he had a big 3. Illinois had gotten a little bit of momentum back. They cut the lead to 8. OG drove and kicked it out to Morgan, who had a 3, and I don't think it ever got back to 10 points or certainly not below over the rest of the game. So he was another guy. Ryan, who did you want to hit on the bench that you thought tonight, or any number of guys that you want to touch on?
Well, I really have to agree with you guys on OG Anunoby and Juwan Morgan. I thought the 2 of them played so well. And the thing about it is defensively, they just make it look so easy. I mean, they're guarding 2 of the higher scorers on Illinois, and they're just staying in a stance defensively, not overplaying anything, not going for pump fakes and and really just playing sound defensive basketball, and they make it look so easy, and they're just spectacular defensive players. And you think like, man, how much better can these guys get defensively? Because the sky really is the limit for those two. They keep their man in front of them. They don't overreact. They don't overhedge. They don't close out too hard. They're just always solid and doing what they need to do. And Anunoby, with those long arms, he really doesn't need to react to a pump fake because he can pretty much block anything. But and also, Anunoby had a layup underneath where he had a guy climbing all over his shoulder, and they didn't call the foul. I couldn't believe that. But yeah, I think that those two guys were my two bench players that really stood out. I think that you also have to look at Harrison Nego, as we mentioned before. I thought he came in and provided some energy, and is really another one of those. I mean, we're gonna have to start including him on this group, the freshman class, because he's actually provided productive minutes. And if a freshman can provide you productive minutes, that's incredibly valuable. I mean, we're used to high-level freshmen coming in and starting or playing a lot of minutes. But, across the country, at regular basketball programs, if a freshman can come in and provide you solid minutes and give your other guys a breather and help you out, that's going to be very valuable, especially in the long term. And Nego's starting to do that. He's getting his 5 minutes a game and providing a lift and not hurting the team. So he's another guy we're going to have to start including on this great freshman class.
Yeah, I totally agree. I looked the combination off the bench of Morgan, Anunoby, and Nego played a combined 42 minutes in a road environment, albeit not as tough a one as IU has seen in Illinois, given some of the crowd shots I saw. But 42 minutes and 0 turnovers between the three of those guys. So again, for IU struggled with turnovers at times tonight, but being able to throw guys in and be able to trust them on the road in a game when you're playing a little bit shorthanded. We'll touch on Troy Williams here in a minute because he sat out a decent amount of the second half as well with what we hope is a minor injury. But to have those guys be able to step up, I think was really key. So, if anybody wants to support the show or just to look like Mr. Phillips here on the, if you're watching on the video with a lovely Assembly Call sweatshirt, we do not give Ryan any extra piece of the proceeds for that shirt, despite his wonderful modeling efforts.
I've been begging for it, but they're not doing it, guys.
We just can't feed the ego at this point, so we don't want to break down and let that happen. But if you want to help support us, one of the ways to do that is to buy some of the gear that we've got out on the site. So it's assemblycall.com/gear. We've got 3 items out there right now, but there's a spot on there if you want to make other suggestions. So the 3 things out there right now is a limestone coaster that I know I use mine to sip my beverage on during the game when I'm watching it upstairs outside of the dungeon that I typically do these post-game shows in. We've got the sweatshirt from Ryan, and we've got the coffee mug that actually came from one of those listener suggestions. So any of those things, a portion of the proceeds go back to the show, and a great way for you to show your support to what we're doing here. So if you want to go check that out, again, assemblycall.com/gear, and feel free to send any other suggestions. Give Ryan any modeling tips, whatever you want to do. So you are listening to the Assembly Call. This is Andy Bottoms. I'm joined by Ryan Phillips and Will DeWitt tonight, talking about IU's 74-47 win in Illinois. IU's 5th Big Ten road win of the season, which is a mark. I did not go back and look to see when the last time that happened was, but certainly in recent memory, the last time I can remember that this team will have a winning record away from home, and certainly a far cry from last season when they struggled so much away from the real Assembly Hall. So I think that's a big note from tonight. Maybe not quite stat of the game worthy, but certainly one that IU fans will be glad to see. So as we move forward, I touched on it a little bit before that break, and Troy Williams had come in, played some of his best basketball over these last couple games, and I think IU fans, it kind of feels like in some ways everybody's, instead of enjoying it, which I think Brody Miller had a good piece about that in the IDS this week, but it felt like everybody was waiting for the other shoe to drop or the bottom to drop out, and Troy to kind of revert to, bad Troy at some point. And so tonight was a little bit interesting because he did miss part of the second half of the game, but he finished. He only played 20 minutes, which a lot less than normal because of that injury. And I think Will's got an update on that I'll kick it to him for in a second. But he had 7 points, 2 of 6 from the field, 1 of 4 from three-point range. I know at least one of those came with the shot clock running down. Did make both his free throws, had 5 rebounds in 20 minutes, which is really good, 2 assists, and only 1 turnover. So other than the shooting numbers, I didn't think Troy played poorly tonight. I thought a couple of the threes early were questionable shots, but Will, I'm gonna throw it to you first to get any thoughts that you had on Troy and any injury update that you might have seen while looking at Twitter, and kind of get your thoughts, because it was a little bit of maybe an incomplete tonight from Troy just because we didn't get to see him all that much.
Yeah, exactly. Alex McCarthy tweeted out that Crean said on his radio show after the game that it is indeed a thigh bruise for Troy, which I can live with. I mean, it could have been a lot worse than the thigh bruise, especially how it looked and how much pain he seemed to be in there for a little bit. But and especially with Rojo's injury, don't think we could have had another one, especially to Troy. But a couple of my takeaways from him tonight, I mean, he was kind of the one that got us started there in that first half when we were just kind of in that lull. I forget exactly when the play happened, but I just recall he was like on the top of the key with the ball, did a little bit of like a shake and bake move, and then drove the lane and got an easy, I don't know if it counted as a layup or a dunk, but I wouldn't say like a half and half, whatever that was. But I thought that was a really nice play, and it kind of just gave us that little bit of a boost there in the first half that we needed. And another fun fact of Troy tonight would be, you said he had the 1 turnover. Well, that came in the second half, so that would make for 3 complete halves that Troy did not have a turnover. And if I would have told you that in the beginning of the season, that you would have saw 3 halves in a row from Troy without 1 single turnover, I think you'd be lying to me if you think that you told me you believe that would happen.
Yeah, Ryan, what did you think of Troy's performance tonight?
I thought he got started pretty slowly, but not disastrously. I mean, sometimes you just know from the get-go it's going to be a bad Troy game. But I thought he was okay. I thought he rebounded really well. I thought that he was grabbing boards. He was really engaged. And yeah, he just had that 1 turnover. He did hit a really important 3 early on when Indiana's offense was struggling. He just stepped into a 3 and hit it. That of course led to him taking a few others that were ill-advised. But you can kind of live with that with Troy because he's been hitting those lately. He was a plus 13 on the night. I mean, I know that stat is wildly unreliable, but even when they were struggling early on, he managed to make up for that by being in on some key runs. And I thought that one thing that I think was a positive was that Illinois was clearly going right at him defensively, and they wanted to attack him when Indiana was on defense. And Troy, instead of being the guy who grabs the ball and goes and, okay, I'm going to make up for my guy just scoring on me, he really tried to help Indiana come back through the offense instead of taking it one-on. We've seen Troy go 1-on-5 several times in his career and 1-on-4 many times in his career, and he didn't do that. He tried to run it through the offense, tried to keep the reins pulled back, and it's good to see him with that effort and not getting frustrated, so he turns around and wants to make up for it. So I thought that was really important to see Troy sort of. That's a mature response. That's not a let's go play and try and get everything back right at once response. So he played through the offense. He did get some points, and I thought he played pretty well. Obviously, that was derailed with the injury, which it doesn't seem as too bad. We had reports on Twitter during the game that were saying that he came to the bench and said, "Hey, I'm good to play." But again, Crean wasn't really subbing anybody in that second half once that group got on the floor and made a run, and so there was no need to throw him back in and possibly risk him, maybe the injury getting worse. So I thought it was an okay game for Troy, but obviously, as you said, he gets an incomplete because of the injury. So we'll see, and this has been a good run of play for him, and hopefully it continues because the next game is going to be a very tough one.
That it will, and we'll touch on the stretch run of games and kind of what the bigger picture looks like, as you mentioned, in the Big Ten race here in a second. But I did want to talk about one other thing, and that was IU's defense tonight. So to allow 47 points in a game, I think is something that not many of us would have guessed. I think there were
A
times this year.
road game,
Yeah, I
too.
think there were times 47 points and a half didn't sound too bad. So part of that was, Illinois really did a good job of controlling the pace in the first half, and so, but even so, IU had just given up 28 points in the first half, gave up only 19 in the second, and they really struggled early. I mean, Illinois had 12 points by the first TV timeout, so even if you factor that in, that's 16 points over the rest of the half. There were a couple of segments between TV timeouts where Illinois had 2 points on two consecutive ones. That really let IU kind of get back in it and take the lead in the first half. But clearly, as you said, Ryan, they came out really trying to attack Troy, run him off of screens. That was one thing that I did get out of the backseat coaching thing is kind of knowing what they wanted to do. I thought they really set out to attack Bryant inside and on ball screens, and they set off to attack Troy off the ball. And they were really successful with those things early. But IU tightened things up. Again, I think part of the change was, when that Juwan Morgan, OG Anunoby lineup came in the first half, and we really saw the same thing with that group in the second half. Just the intensity ratcheted up. They really forced Illinois to take tough shots, and Illinois started to settle as they've really done. They've only got a couple guys who have been even remotely reliable scorers, and I think just kind of the pressure of that got to them a bit. But Ryan, what did you see IU do differently in the second half, perhaps, than they did in the first, that may have led to that even better defensive performance?
I think they made Illinois shoot the basketball, and they backed off, didn't play as aggressively on the perimeter, and they did what we've seen over the last few weeks, was they tried to make their opponent jump shooters. And there are great shooting teams out there, but you will always take a guy shooting a jumper over a guy driving to the hoop, and they basically made Illinois beat them. And Illinois can't beat them in that way. They didn't beat themselves, and they made Illinois try and do some stuff. And the other thing is they rebounded the misses. That was the big thing. There were no second chance points for I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but it just felt like there were no second chance points at any time for Illinois. And I think those two things really are starting to be indicative of what this team can do. This team can stop teams. This team can rebound. This team can force a team out of the lane and into shooting jumpers. And that's something that, man, I mean, if you would ask me in December, could this team do this? I after that Duke game, man, that was one of the worst defensive performances I've ever seen in college basketball. And, of a game that I've watched all of. I'll qualify it with that, because usually if it's that bad, I just turn it off. But because of this job, I'm forced to watch those games. But I just think this team has changed so much, and they adjust too, and that's the thing that we haven't seen for years. And this year, Coach Green has made great adjustments for the most part. I mean, there have been some times where things don't, but you don't see them just randomly going into a zone. If the man-to-man is working, there's no need to change it, and they don't need to mask defenses anymore like they used to, or change in the middle of a possession. So I don't, I feel like this team is different than the last few years, and I know a lot of people are comparing it to, oh, well, we're not going to do anything in the Big Ten tournament. We never do anything in the Big Ten tournament under Crean. Oh, we collapsed late under Crean. This is definitely at new territory, I think, and I think it looks like new territory too. This team is actually getting better and really finding an identity, and it's on both ends of the floor. It's not just offensively. We know what this team can do offensively, and they're doing it defensively.
Yeah, so a couple defensive stats that jumped out at me tonight, and then I'll throw it to Will for any other stats he may have. But IU allowed .77 points per possession according to Ken Pom. Guys not named Jalen Coleman Lands, nobody scored more than 8 points in the game, and only one other guy scored more than 5. So they held Nunn and Hill to a combined 13 points. Guys not named Jalen Coleman Lands were 1 of 13 from 3. So Ryan, I think that speaks to your point of make them prove that they can make shots and beat you. And I think IU did really well there. So .77 points per possession, pretty good regardless of the competition in my eyes at least. And as of now, IU up to 62nd in the defensive ratings on Ken Pom, and 16th overall, at least what I'm looking at now, which will surely refresh as we go here. So Will, before we kind of transition to Big Ten standings and stretch run talk, any other stats you wanted to hit from tonight?
Yeah, I try to stay away from shooting numbers because I mean anyone can look them up at the box score, but you just have to compare these two halves and just kind of appreciate, like Ryan said, they were able to just overcome their deficiencies there in the first half, make some adjustments, and come out in the second half just shooting pretty well. I mean, looking at the first half, they were only 12 of 29, from the field, only 3 of 15 from downtown, which for us that's scary bad. I mean, we're usually a team that can hit around 40% of those shots. So to like only make half of that is a little ridiculous. But in that first half, we only had .844 points per possession, and we only had a scoring percent of 37.5. Well, in the second half, guys, we had a 1.567 points per possession, and then we bumped that up to a 56.7 scoring percent. So obviously those numbers are much more what we're accustomed to, as Hoosier fans here. And looking at the field goal numbers, I mean, much better. 10 of 17 from deep, 15 of 26 overall. And like you alluded to in your opening statement, we scored as many points, 47, that Illinois did in the whole first game. And then Yogi's 19 points in the second half is exactly what Illinois scored as a team in that second half as well. So Yogi scored just as much as a whole squad up there in that second half. But those are the stats that have been jumping out to me.
All right, so IU now sits at 13-3 in the conference with 2 games to play. They do have, as Ryan mentioned, a little bit of a layoff, essentially the next 4 days off. They don't play again until Tuesday night, so no game this weekend for IU. But they're 13-3 right now, which puts them a game up in the loss column against Iowa and Maryland, who are both 11-4 and have 3 games remaining. So let's just take a quick look here. I'll just kind of run down the remaining schedules for these teams. I mean, IU, we know next Tuesday at Iowa, and then the following Sunday, I believe it is, against Maryland at home. So we know what IU has. So let's talk a little bit about what Iowa has. So they've lost 3 out of 4. The only game they won in that stretch was a really ugly home win by about 4, I think, against Minnesota. And so they finish at Ohio State on Sunday, and then they obviously face IU on Tuesday at home, and then they finish on the road at Michigan. So 2 road games for Iowa I don't know that we can consider Ohio State a bubble team anymore. I'm not sure that I ever really did, but them and Michigan, who certainly will need that game quite a bit the way they've played down the stretch and against IU. Maryland, they go to Purdue on Saturday afternoon. They host Illinois at home in a game that, based on anything we've seen from Illinois this year, they should win, and then finish at IU. So obviously, with that in mind, if IU wins out, they do control their own destiny in terms of winning out, because they play both those teams. They could actually, if they win out, win the conference by 2 full games, if that is to happen. If they win one of those games, and one of Iowa or Maryland wins out, they get a share of the Big Ten title. So obviously that's exciting. I think IU fans will be sitting around and rooting against both those teams over the course of the weekend, even though in one case that means actually rooting for Purdue. But for the good of the cause and for the Big Ten championship, I think we can maybe tough it out and then take a nice hot shower to cleanse ourselves afterwards. So Ryan, so let's talk Iowa first here briefly. What do you think has been the difference for them faltering a bit over the last couple weeks after such a hot start in the Big Ten? And do you think that they can, what are their chances of running the table at this point?
Well, I just think that they and Dan Dockich said it on the broadcast, and a big fan of the show, Dan Dockich, said tonight that they look tired and they're not getting any production from their bench. And quite frankly, yeah, I agree with that. I think that they just have not looked very good lately. They look like a different team, and it's not. It's interesting because they were so solid all year in every aspect. They on both ends of the floor, and they rebounded, and they it really became a team that wasn't just Jared Uthoff. But now it seems like they're reverting back to that, where they just rely on Uthoff and Peter Jok to do everything. and that's a problem, and especially late in the year when guys are tired and worn out and they've taken a lot of shots this year and their legs are heavier and their shooting percentages are going to drop, and you go through lulls, and they're in a lull right now and they are trending down big time, and I don't see them winning out just because of the way they've played lately. And whether or not they beat Indiana on Tuesday, I mean, look, that's going to be a very tough game. Iowa's only lost once at home this year, and that was to Wisconsin the other night. So it's really hard for me to see them winning out, but that is definitely going to be a tough game for Indiana. I don't think there's any question about that. After coming off that loss, they're going to really want to, hammer someone at home. They're going to really want to make up for it. But yeah, so they're up and down right now. They're really not playing terribly well. But that's going to be I don't see them winning out, but I can see them beating Indiana on Tuesday. I think that's going to be a game they've got circled big on their calendar because they lost to Indiana earlier in the year, and they want that payback.
Yep, I would agree. I think that's one that means a lot to them. Although, the way they've played, they can ill afford to look past Ohio State, who really hasn't been all that good either. But Iowa's just been playing pretty much only close games over this last run. So, I think that could end up being maybe a closer game than people think. I don't necessarily believe that Ohio State springs the upset, but Iowa's been letting pretty much anybody be in the game of late.
Yeah, no, I think that it's funny because I think if you ask people, they wouldn't know. But Ohio State is 10-6. Yeah, they haven't in the conference. They haven't had a great conference slate. Very particularly difficult conference slate. But they're 10-6, and you're playing a 10-6 team on the road when they're really looking to make some noise and possibly earn a Big Ten or earn an NCAA tournament berth, which I don't think is going to happen right now. But at the same time, they're looking to make noise with a win over a big opponent, and they're seriously motivated. And that's gonna be a very tough game. And then Iowa's got a tough one to finish the season as well when they have to go at Michigan. So they've got three really tough games to finish the season that 3-4 weeks ago did not look like tough games to finish the season. Now they're three really tough games.
Yep, I would agree. And I think Maryland, that Illinois game at home, obviously I don't think is going to be a challenge for them, but they are in a similar position. I mean, they have struggled over these last over their last 3 games as well. So they lost to Wisconsin by 13 at home, lost at Minnesota, and then against Michigan on Sunday, it felt like a couple times they were just going to run them out of the gym, and they were never able to put them away. And Michigan really played well to come back in that. So they head to Purdue. The tougher Big Ten road games that they have played this year, they have typically lost or at least played close games in. They did beat Wisconsin on a late 3 from Melo Trimble, but they lost at Michigan. They lost at Michigan State. They won at Ohio State by 5. They won at Nebraska by 5 and lost at Minnesota. So hasn't been a team that has done all that well away from home. They've got 2 tough road games left. I certainly give Iowa probably a better chance to win out than I would Maryland. Would you disagree with that, Ryan, based on how those guys are playing?
No, I think it's I honestly have them about even to win out right now, which is I don't have a lot of confidence in either team right now. I think Diamond Stone, he got suspended and they lost that game at Minnesota. He's just emotionally kind of in a wreck, and he either shows up and is just a world beater, or he's just kind of in and out and not really actually kind of like Thomas Bryant was early in the year. Like you didn't really know what you were going to get. And I think he's there right now, and I think that they really need to score on the inside to beat Purdue. And Purdue coming off, a pretty devastating loss to Indiana is going to be at home at Mackey. That place is going to be nuts, and that they need that win. This is a tournament seeding game for them, and they need that win and to move up. And they're going to want that, just like Ohio State is badly going to want to beat Iowa. These are motivated teams that these teams are playing, whereas a couple weeks ago it might have looked like, they'll be middle-of-the-road teams. They're playing tough teams down the stretch, and there's a really good chance that, by Monday, Indiana will have a share of the Big Ten title locked up. There is a chance. You can't count on that, obviously, and you don't want to rely on that. You want to win your games and take care of your business, but both teams are facing a very tough stretch run that didn't look tough a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I would agree. So, IU fans, enjoy the weekend off from this team. Get a little bit of rest yourself, but gather around your televisions on Saturday and Sunday afternoon and root for those guys to lose. And maybe, as Ryan said, IU will already own a share of that by the time they suit up to face Iowa on Tuesday. So, you're listening to the assembly call. One thing that we have not touched on yet is the email list that we have. So we have a post-game email that goes out the morning after every game, usually around I think 6:30. I think it's typically there, 6:30 or 7:30. I forget the between the time zones, but certainly will be in your inbox early tomorrow morning. So you'll get some analysis potentially from Jared. I'm not sure where or if he'll be able to watch the game, but we'll get the email put together with or without a contribution from him. Will have a write-up in there as well, his stat of the game. I'll do the lineup analysis and get that out to everybody tomorrow, and also we'll send some other information as we go forward through the course of the week and leading up to next week's game. So the things in there are only for subscribers to the email list. So to get on there and join, I think we're nearing the 1,700 member mark for this. So join those IU fans by going to assemblycall.com/subscribe. Or texting Indiana to 44144. So if you do that, you'll get a quick text back and a link where you can go and sign up and enter your email address and do that very quickly and start to support the show in that way and get our post game analysis and thoughts leading up to the other big games down the stretch. And it is an exciting stretch, that is for sure. So you're listening to the Assembly Call. This is Andy Bottoms. I'm with Ryan Phillips and Will DeWitt, and we're getting ready to close up here after IU's road win at Illinois tonight. And so the only things left to do are to talk about a little bit about the Iowa game, which we have already, but just to give our picks for that game, and then we'll do last call and bid everyone a good night. So Jared is not here to do picks, and typically we make the person who isn't here take the non-IU team. In this case, though, I think we all know that because we've seen it before, that in virtually any scenario, Jared is going to be able to talk himself into IU winning, no matter what it seems, no matter what the percentages are in KenPom right now, which I think give IU about a 33% chance to win. So if we've learned nothing over the past couple of years, it's that Jared is going to pick IU in this game. So I will allow him to change that thought if he wants, but I have a feeling that if he was here, that is what he would say. I don't know what he would have given as his banner moment. That was more of a guess. This is more of a certainty. So for now, I'm going to put him on record as taking IU at Iowa on Tuesday night. Ryan, I'll go to you next. Who you got?
I struggled with this one a little bit because Iowa has played so well at home. I am going to, I think, surprise people and pick Indiana to win the game. I think that Iowa's scuffling leaves the door open for Indiana. I think Yogi Ferrell is on fire right now, and I think the defense is really humming. And I think that this team found a formula to beat Iowa a couple weeks ago, and I think that people have copied it. And I think that it's worked to isolate Utah. Don't let him beat you inside. Make him beat you from deep, and if he does, hey, hats off to him. And then with the rest of the guys, just play right up in their faces and make them beat you with shots and not drives. And look, it's going to be a very tough game. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to go right down to the wire. But I think that Indiana can win this game, and I think ultimately they do. And I think that they go in with the motivation of if we win this, we win the Big Ten title. And I think they go in and get it.
All right, Will, what about you?
I feel pretty much exactly like Ryan in this one, but I'm going to use my weird logic because that's what I like to do. And the one time this whole Big Ten season I picked against Indiana, Indiana won, and I want them to win. So I'm going to choose Iowa just for that fact. And when we win that game, you guys can thank me later.
I got news for you, Will. Indiana did not lose because you picked against.
Yes, they did, Ryan. Yes, they did. They watched the show.
Pure speculation, Ryan. We can't prove that one way or the other.
Exactly. Gosh.
I'm like Ryan. I'm still, even as I'm starting to talk right now, struggling to figure out who to pick in this. I think you can play out a scenario either way in this one where IU can win it, and you can play out one where they lose and a motivated Iowa team really comes back. I think perhaps the thing that is pushing me over the edge. I think I am going to pick Iowa, is because I think the Robert Johnson loss was one IU could sustain a little bit easier tonight than they would be able to against Iowa. And we don't have any idea at this point whether he's going to play, how effective he would be if he did. But I think that's one thing that scares me about IU defensively. I mean, he was a huge part of what they were able to do in that first Iowa matchup. And I'm just not sure, against an Illinois team that's not all that powerful offensively and just doesn't have as many weapons. I think you're able to minimize the damage of him not being in the game. I'm not sure you can do that in a tough road environment against Iowa, because quite frankly, if Iowa wins against Ohio State, they're going to have a ton of motivation to beat IU to go into the last game of the season, a chance to be tied. And if they lose to Ohio State, they're going to be pretty angry and wanting to get back. Also, their last home game of the year, so I'm not sure who all are seniors on their team. They have a few guys that feel like they've been there forever. So I think an emotional setting that's going to be a tough one for IU to go into. So I'm going to take Iowa, but again, I can certainly see a scenario based on the things that you said, Ryan, and what IU was able to do with them defensively. If they get Johnson back and play well, and if they shoot the ball well, and really, Iowa struggles as they have, and the bench really steps up and outplays them, I think that they could get it done. But I'm gonna go with Iowa for now, and potentially look at changing that depending on Rojo's status.
Yeah, I will say I have I reserve the right to change my pick if Robert Johnson doesn't play. I'm assuming he will, because I think the plan was to give him a week off and, whatever it's going to be, about 10 days off, and see what happens. If he doesn't play and he's not up to playing, that's going to be a much tougher game because, as you mentioned, the defensive situation. So keep an eye on Twitter, folks. I may change my pick depending on his status.
Yeah, I think his ankle is quickly entering Tom Coverdale status from the Final Four in 2002. So, all right, well, with that, it's time for last call. It's getting close to midnight here in the Eastern Time Zone, and we've got some things to do to get the email ready for tomorrow, and I've got some other stuff to do to recap the bracket happenings of the night. So, Will, I'll throw it to you first for last call.
Yeah, sure. Since Ryan's going to throw out his Twitter out there, I might as well say, yeah, follow me on Twitter too. I might change my pick, or I might just tweet something funny. You never know. But no, I have a couple of more injury updates just because why not? Well, no update on Robert Johnson, but that's an update by itself. And then also the strength and conditioning coach, Lionel Anderson, is sick. That's why you saw that little ice baggie on his head from time to time, apparently. And then Chronic Hoosier tweeted out, you're in like an insane spot when you need to do like injury updates on the strength coach. And I'm paraphrasing. If you know Chronic, he probably used another adjective in there that I'm not going to say on the air. But it's kind of funny when you're in those kind of spots when people are actually asking like about the condition of a coach. But yeah, it was we talked about, we were able to survive that punch in the first half and come out swinging in the second. And we're able to overcome, our deficiencies and come out with a win, which seems to be the story of the season, especially the stretch here throughout the Big Ten play. And then I'm going to leave you guys with one number, 4. That's how many more three-pointers Yogi needs in Big Ten play to break A.J. Guyton's record. So let's see, he has a couple more games to do that. I'm certain he will, but I don't want to say that, so I'm going to say we'll see. So that's going to be my last call.
All right, sounds good. Ryan, what's your last call?
My number, since I'm going to do a stat to end it, is 1976. That is the largest win Indiana has had at Illinois since 1976 tonight, with a 74-47 victory. This team it continues to really impress and amaze, and as we've said, and Jared has said, you're doing a disservice to this team by constantly referring back to December and all that stuff and where they've come from. Well, I think it helps to remember where we were. This team was struggling. It was reeling, and we weren't sure about the future of the program. And now in Big Ten play, 13-3. This team has 13 Big Ten wins. Regardless of what else happens the rest of the way, 13 Big Ten wins. I don't think anybody would have predicted that at the beginning of Big Ten play. That's already done. We've got that. They have a chance for 14 and then 15, which would be an all-timer of a season. I mean, this is like, I realize, again, weak conference slate, all that stuff. Sure, those caveats are out there. But you know what? This team has buckled down and actually won the games. And remember, one of those losses was an overtime loss to Wisconsin. One of them was that debacle at Penn State where they still should have won the game, and then they got blown out in East Lansing like many teams do. So, I mean, the 3 losses weren't even that bad. So we're looking at it and we're thinking this team really is looking special. I mean, it is. And I finished this way the last couple of shows because I just want people to remember, when you're in the midst of something great and you don't realize it, it really sucks later on to look back and say, you know what, that was really fun and I wish I would have noticed. Well, this is it right now. This team has a chance to win the Big Ten title outright. Even if they get a share, it would still be amazing, but let's win that Big Ten title outright. And this team has a chance to do that, and I don't think anybody thought that was possible, even at the beginning of the year before the troubles, because of how loaded teams like Michigan State and Maryland and whoever else. I mean, Purdue was getting some predictions for a Big Ten title. We all knew that was stupid, but that's just us. But so I think that it's really special what this team has done. It's impressive, and it could all go to hell in the next week. But for right now, let's enjoy it, and let's remember that these guys are doing a pretty incredible job.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm going to say probably a lot of similar things to what you did, but 2 things that stood out to me about tonight's game. One, shorthand without Robert Johnson. Troy Williams goes down in the second half after playing some of the best basketball of his career over the last couple games, and these guys did not wilt. Different guys stepped up. Zaislov came back and had a big second half. Juwan Morgan and OG Anunoby came in. Max Bielfeld, as you said, Ryan, played really well in the first half when Bryant was struggling. Bryant stepped up in the second half, and in the second, and it was a game that we were all worried about because of recent struggles in Champaign. The way IU has played there in the past, even some of the better teams have not shown up and played well there, and I think it goes right along with what you're saying, Ryan. Of we need to get, and this is coming from somebody who just picked Iowa to win the next game, but it's time we start giving these guys the benefit of the doubt and not letting the things that haunted us from last year get in our heads and say, look, these guys might not be able to do this. Maybe this isn't for real. And waiting, like I said, people were for Troy, waiting for this team, for the other shoe to drop or the bottom to drop out. Maybe that's not going to happen. Maybe it will. We don't know. But quite honestly, at this point, I totally agree with you that you've got to enjoy it. The way this team has bounced back, the way they bounced back within this game, and just trucked Illinois in the second half was really impressive. And they didn't let up. They didn't let them back in the game like they did against Purdue. And I think, there's something to be said for that. And as you said, we need to enjoy it. We need to appreciate it. And what these guys have done to be able to do it as different things have happened over the course of the year, and the resiliency that it feels like has really become a staple of this team was on display tonight as different guys went down. And there was always somebody waiting to pick the team back up. To end on a little bit lighter note, as Will gave the coach or the update about the strength coach, it was not inconceivable to anyone watching the game to think that he had just come out so jacked up after a made 3 going into a timeout that he had went to chest bump someone and fallen on the floor. Anyway, yeah, we're definitely at a point where Coach L needs to provide status updates on how he's doing as well as the rest of the team. So we'll close it up there. Again, IU wins 74-47. Against Illinois in Champaign, picks up its 5th Big Ten road win of the season and moves to 13-3. In doing so, scored as many points in the second half as Illinois did the entire game, and Yogi Ferrell alone tied the Illini in the second half with 19 points. So a lot of things to be excited about if you're an IU fan tonight. And we can enjoy the weekend knowing that IU is going to be in first place as they head into Iowa on next Tuesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. It'll be on ESPN, and the Hoosiers will, no matter what the other teams do over the weekend, will have a chance to win an outright Big Ten title with a win in Iowa on Tuesday night. So that will give us something to look forward to. Start counting the hours till tip-off now, and when that game is over, we'll be right back here at full strength on the assembly call after the game. So thanks for joining us tonight, everybody, and we will talk to you on Tuesday night.